the Connecticut market is more efficient than it's ever been, and hard to even predict the pricing because there's an X flow and a resurgence that's happening that you haven't seen since 2008. It's kind of exciting.
So now it's 4:01. Let's start the meeting. Boom, we've begun. Let me at least introduce you.
I was already going.
And then we get into it. I see people pouring in right now. We got our first 36, but there's new people coming in every second, which is very exciting. So I have two City Mouse, Louise Phillips and Roberto Cabrera, and I have two Country Mouse, Scott Hobbs and John Engel. And I thought that this would be a good interplay, and we could talk about the New York market, the suburban market, and how the New York market is affecting the suburban market. And if we can, we're going to open it up to questions from the people and open up a conversation. But I guess let's begin with, how's the market, Louise?
I was just sharing about what is going on. It has kind of been not necessarily unpredictable, but exciting, because Lord knows I've been planting a lot of seeds for the last 6 months, and and my buds are popping, meaning I probably will do, hopefully sending out about $20 million worth of transaction summaries of deals that are, I got 2 contracts signed last week. I got 2 deals accepted yesterday. I'm about to do 1 today. We're looking like it could be an 8-deal week, which I haven't seen that in a long time. So it's exciting.
Is that because sellers are readjusting their expectations and they're meeting the market where it is, or are you finding that demand has suddenly surged?
I think it's multifaceted. In my experience, and Roberto's may be different, but I really find that I think of myself as an educator, not a salesperson, first of all. And so I have been working with the people that I have. I have, I think, 40 listings right now. It's probably 126 million in listings. And finally, from June 22nd to now, they're starting to pluck off, And I think that what's happening is that my advice has been, stop listening to the noise. You are your best expert. You know what your risk tolerance is. And you're not looking for the bottom of the market. You're looking for a home. So yes, I sold this apartment to you 4 years ago, and yeah, you're probably going to be a little bit underwater, but look at what that was listed at 18 months ago and look at it where it is today. And you're just looking to buy the next chapter in your upgrade. On the contrary, the empty nesters, I'm saying, if you're selling your asset in Connecticut and coming to the city, it depends on where you are in your life of whether you make the decision to rent or buy.
I think it's all over the place. I think the market's all over the place. I mean, I don't think there's a solid sense of where pricing is. We don't have enough price discovery with regards to, I think the amount of COVID deals that have been done are probably close to 2,000 now, and only about 25% of them have closed. So we really don't have a solid idea of where the pricing is. And I think pricing's everything. And we have sellers who are pricing in they're aspirationally pricing in the wrong place. And, and buyers who are seeking to have 20% off, and that doesn't exist either.
No.
I mean,
no,
it just doesn't exist.
And the truth of the matter is our market, I'm not sure, John, you'll speak to your market, but I know my Connecticut clients who've reached out to me and said, hey, will you list my apartment in New York? Because they're New Yorkers that want to come to Connecticut. And I'm like, I am not an expert in Connecticut. That being said, they paid for whatever they paid for in 2008, and they want that price. They want what their neighbor got in 2015. And it's just, you cannot make up the market. And I agree that there's limited data, Roberto, but the truth is every deal, I had 15 deals in contract, March 18th, 15 deals, 13 of them closed. Every one of them had a credit. So when you have a recorded price, it is not the price.
So where do you get, both of you, where do you get your information about accurate price?
Dial for dollars.
You got to call people.
I call Roberto. How you doing, buddy? Talk to me about that apartment. And I get real-time data. And then when I'm talking to my clients, I'm like, listen, they've been on the market for 37 days. They've had 2 showings. I don't care that they're asking that much money. You should call that broker and have them list it. Have them listed for the same price. If it's, you know, I have turned away more business because I care too much for them to mislead them. And I really mean that.
How about you, Roberto? Where do you get your pricing data? How do you find out?
Phone calls. I constantly am calling because you see that something's in the contract. You have to, and it's also about, we've been doing this for a long time. I've been doing this 22 years. You have a lot of relationships. You have to call people and find out, like, listen, how close were you to ask? Where, you know, how, you know, on top of that, what sort of, how many showings were you getting? Like, I have a property that I had 2 properties that went into contract. And I honestly feel that we got lucky because aside from those particular showings, there was no one calling for the next 2, 3, 4 weeks. Maybe 1 call, 2 calls. So if we didn't get that particular deal, we were nowhere.
Yeah,
So
I would agree with that.
I read yesterday, I think in the Post, they said that rumors of New York's demise are greatly exaggerated, that New York is doing just fine.
I mean, I wouldn't say we're just fine. I think we have a long road in front of us, but I believe that, you know, we all know I mean, for me, I feel that my knowledge is most embedded in human nature and understanding cause and effects of things. And, you know, we had a terrorist attack and that cause and effect. We had a financial meltdown that had a cause and effect. When you have a health crisis, it is just not going to be the same. And it's not going to be on the same timeline that other things might be a little more predictable. I mean, if you all recall, you know, in the like 3rd week or 4th week of March, you know, economists were like, well, we're predicting a V recovery here and I'm like, what? So I think that confidence is a lot. I also think that, you know, I think that the political environment that we're experiencing locally in New York, let's not go internet, let's not go national, but locally has people, it's accelerating their timelines.
100%. I totally agree with that. I think the people that have a large percentage of the people that have left were going to leave anyway, and COVID accelerated that decision. I also think that the stories of people leaving, sure, there are people leaving, there's thousands of people that have left, but these are thousands of people out of 8 million in the city. Also, I believe that that's going to be temporary to a certain degree. Fritz Frieden, who's our executive director of leasing, he found a study that was, they went to the US Postal Service and they found out how many between March and July, how many temporary changes of address there were. There were 400,000 temporary changes of address, but only 115 some thousand of those were actually for out of New York City. So a lot of that has been overblown, and a lot of the movement that's happened has been interborough, people going from Manhattan to a different place in Manhattan, Manhattan to Brooklyn, Brooklyn to Queens, but not necessarily as many going out as anticipated. And a lot of people that are going out, I personally believe it's temporary, and it's going to create a bubble in your market, John.
Yeah, totally.
Scott, are they right? Now, let me introduce Scott Hobbs. Scott Hobbs is on the call, and he's not only a builder of fine custom homes in Connecticut and in the Hamptons and in Westchester and really nice apartments in New York. So Scott has a foot in the suburbs and a foot in the city. How are you seeing behaviors change, both going in the first half of the pandemic? And now what I'm hearing from Louise is there's been a bit of a change since June. So I want to hear, how are you seeing attitudes change? Are people spending more money, less money, or are they spending it differently over the last couple of months?
Well, I think we've definitely seen out here in the suburbs, and we're also in northern New Jersey, but the suburbs and the Hamptons, that people they want to have somewhere else to go, and it's important for them to have somewhere else to go. So, you know, a lot of folks had summer houses, and now you're taking your summer house and you're making it into your permanent residence. You had one couple that we were just finishing up what was going to be a family house in Greenwich for the summer. And it really became the fact that they had their extended family of, I think, their 3 kids with their families and grandchildren and stuff all living there. And it became almost pretty much their permanent residence, but they're not moving out of New York. I mean, they're keeping their New York City presence. They have their New York City apartment. It's not gone away. It's just they've kind of switched from a primary residence in the city to a primary residence in the suburbs. And is it likely that that will go back? Yes. And I mean, I think it will go back. Not everybody. I mean, there's also a whole demographic issue going on with millennials and having school-age children. And if you have school-age children, there's definitely a pull toward the suburbs anyway for a large number of those people. And we were seeing that was already starting. And I think the pandemic accelerated that. I think one of the biggest issues in New York City, and kind of almost the biggest Rubik cube to solve, is elevators. And that's the hardest part. But as we see with COVID treatments are coming along. They're coming along fast, and you're coming up with vaccines, and you're coming up with other stuff. So if we're looking toward next summer, the reality is COVID is a very active memory, but it's not a threat. You know, New York has had a long habit of coming back very strong and quickly. And we have some of our New York City and suburb clients that, you know, they were looking for an apartment in New York City before COVID broke. And right now they're going, boy, I'm going to get a great deal on something. And they're aggressively, actively looking for something else still in New York. So I don't see that, you know, New York is a huge pull. It should always be a pull, as long as, again, the treatments for COVID and all of that diminishes. And, you know, as with a lot of places, New York has some governance issues that I think they can work out. And New York's shown over time that they do work it out, and it goes through different periods. So hopefully that will return, because I think it's good for all of us to have New York. I think it's good for the United States to have New York be a healthy place.
Are you busy?
We're very busy. We were busy going into it, and that was good, because there's no question at the very beginning. I mean, as with many businesses, there was crickets chirping, and, you know, all of our New York work was shut down for 3 months. That was very traumatic. We're still seeing there's a lot of activity out there. All the architects at this point are busy. The building departments are all busy. And I mean, probably as one piece of advice for people buying something is, if you're buying something and want to do work, you can't start planning it soon enough, because it's going to take a long time to get the architects and engineers involved in it, to line up the contractors, to get the approvals. And the sooner you start, the more likely you'll be able to actually, you know, do something when you want to do it.
John, can I
go
just
ahead.
real quick, excuse me, I wanted to just ask Scott, excuse me, how many projects do you work on in one given, I mean, how many teams do you have floating in your trifecta?
Sure. We keep about 4 to 5 projects going in the city. We've got about 6 in the Hamptons at a time. We got about a dozen in the Fairchester area, cutting up into Litchfield and a little bit of Dutchess. And then we have about 5 or 6 out in northern New Jersey too.
What's the average size?
It's tough to come up with an average. I mean, it's better to say that under our distinguished home projects, you know, we're from 2.5 million up to 40. And then we also have a care division, and our care division takes care of ongoing maintenance and upkeep issues for houses, and also smaller renovations. And they are really, really, really busy right now. They are absolutely flat out.
Are you
I
fine?
got to say, you know, I heard that this pandemic was going to be really tough on the economy, and we were going to go into this period of indecision before a national election. And yet you're telling me you're as busy as ever, and your projects are 1, 2, 3 year projects, and there's been no diminishment of energy in your market. And Louise has never been busier than she is right now. And
Great.
so I'm trying to understand whether I can believe that the city's doing fine, the suburbs are doing fine, the builders are doing fine.
Let me caveat.
Yeah, that's the caveat too. You go first, Scott.
So I mean, first off, there was a period. I mean, there was like 3 months where, I mean, again, crickets chirping, there's terror. And that has, you know, there's a long lead time on all of these things. I think, as Louise had pointed out there, it's like you have this long period of getting the listings, of listing them, getting the word out there, talking to people, and then all the buds bloom at a certain point. but there's definitely a break inside the system, and trying to get approvals, we have a break right now. So there is gaps. And in New York, there's still a lot more indecision for people doing construction versus in the suburb markets. But we still see people have stuff going on. It's just, when will they pull the trigger and when will they get their approvals? Sorry.
And to say that, I don't even know what my sales are this year, but you know, and I definitely don't want to really focus on it right now. But, you know, if I look at historically of doing 180 to 250 million every single year, am I there? I'm probably not. I would say I'm probably 60% from last year, but or historically. And that being said, all I'm saying is that what I see is momentum beginning, because my business ranges from 665,000 to 15 million. And I have 40 listings. I have a lot of data right there. I'm in every niche of the market right now, except for I just closed on my last townhouse. But, you know, I think what is interesting to me, of those 8 deals that I'm talking about, they all range from $1 million to 3.8. And so $1.1 million to 3.8, most of them in the 2 million bucket. So that's a niche of the market that is frothy, and they almost are like, it's more about the quality of life upgrade and locking and nesting, which is just as much important financially as it is emotionally.
75% of our deals are 2 million and below right now.
Yeah, and in fact, the last 2 weeks we did, I think it was 225 transactions, equaling about 332 million in 2 weeks. Just us. It's pretty amazing. Ranging from 250,000 to 22 million.
Who's buying at $1 million? Roberto identified the $1.5 million to 2 million as the sweet spot in the New York City market. And I heard earlier a passing reference to millennials and the importance of looking at the demographics. Who's buying the $2 million apartments? Are they coming from out of town, or are they trading up in the New York market?
They're definitely looking for opportunities to trade up, but I think that a lot of people are not, they're looking for the 20% off, and there's not 20% off. There's 15% off, and there's still, like Louise had mentioned earlier, there's
15%. Every one of my deals are within 1% or above the asking price.
I'm talking.
Everybody, if you're dealing with Louise, you're paying full price. Full price.
They're anomalies. No, but there are anomalies that are happening. But
really,
as you go up the price scale, if you go up the price scale, if you look at my newsletter, and I've got this amazing chart from Urban Digs right here, for deals that are below $1 million, the negotiation is 7.9%. Between 1 and 2 million, it's about 9.6%. Between 2 and 3 million, it's 11.6%. Between 3 and 5 million, 3.9%. And then if you get to 5 to 10 million, there were a couple, and the thing is, there's only a handful of deals that are happening at that level. The velocity is increasing, but there was a 20% average negotiation. But that's, I mean, I have a client right now who's,
deals. Yeah, there were 7 deals north of 10 million.
Yeah, so that's not a big sample. You know, and the problem is, you know, I have a client we've been looking for the longest time, and maybe once a year we find something that's appropriate for him. And he's in the 5, 6, 7 million range. There's something we saw last week that he really, really likes because he doesn't want to do any work, and it has to be almost pristine and perfect. And his perception is the market's way off, and this apartment is grossly overpriced. So he wants to negotiate 15, 20%. The fact is, it's one of those special apartments that he's not the only person who's been looking that long. So now the apartment's only been on the market for about a week. They've got 2 or 3 people that are already interested. And he just can't wrap his head around that concept, that he's not going to be able to negotiate a substantial amount.
I think it's going to become a priority of whether he wants to feel he made a great deal and beat the system, or he's going to have a home or not.
Really? Yeah, he's going to, I feel he's going to lose it. He's going to lose it.
I actually had a situation where over the 4th of July weekend, a client called up taking a look at a property next door to them, and just making a long story short, they had looked for like a year for their other property, for the property they finally bought, and they negotiated and got a great deal. And I came out that day to help them look at the property because I didn't want to wait through the weekend because I didn't know if it would be there. And he asked at the end, like, what's the COVID discount? And I told him in this area, it's like, there is no discount. And matter of fact, if you're serious about the property, you need to put in an offer this weekend. I mean, I don't care what the offer is, and I won't advise you on that, but you got to put in an offer this weekend to let them know that you're serious and understand that the offer isn't good enough. They may not think you are serious, and by Monday it may be gone. And sure enough, it turned into a bidding war, and they ended up getting the property, which was very good for them, and I think the right thing for them. But just, I mean, in a 3-month period, the suburbs changed in a heartbeat under that negotiation. And for a special good property, if you're not ready to move, you have a problem. And it's good to see that in New York, you have the same thing for the special properties.
Yeah.
Louise, you said it was an efficient market earlier. And I have to say, I think it's anything but. I see huge swings in valuations. And I can't predict which houses are going to sell quickly and which ones are not. And I think that at least out here in Connecticut, we're having a great deal of difficulty pricing houses. You can look at the historical 12 months of sales and it doesn't help you. Now, you said already that you have to call people because the market's moving that fast.
No.
Happening now.
No. Let me reset that. First of all, I live in a vertical environment, so I have stacked inventory. Mirror of something, it's a little bit easier to gather the data. And I personally, I'm known for my research and data and because it's the only way I can make sense of moments in time. And it's the only way I can be the expert in that particular apartment or home is by drilling down deep into that understanding. And so sometimes my owners need to see what the peak of the market was because they keep thinking that their next door neighbor in 2015 got $4.5 million. And I'm recommending that they come on the market for 3.3. And they're like, how dare you? And, but I can just say, so that was 2015. Look at your neighbor that sold in 16 and look at your neighbor who sold in 17 and look at your neighbor who sold in 18. And by the way, 16 apartments came on the market in your building and couldn't sell and took them off the market. So we can find principles to stand on an asking price, or we can find data to stand on an asking price. And that is even, I do start to talk a little bit about, like, if this was before COVID in March, when we had huge traction, I was doing 4 to 7 transactions a month, January, February, and March, which was kind of like old school, old days. And it was also because I was pricing with a very focused attention to real-time numbers, which is not even what's closed, what's in contract, and why is it in contract, and what was the motivation behind that low sale, where we come to learn that the owner had already bought something. So that kind of texture to a deal does create efficiency.
Okay. I have a question from Heather. I don't know if she wants to ask it yet. I unmuted her. I also see a question from James Bosch, and I'll ask it, but I'm going to unmute him as well in case he wants to follow up. He wants to know whether we're all excited about the market in New York and Connecticut, but are we both competing for a smaller pie? Are we both basically losing out because of the high cost of this area, the Northeast? Are we losing out to Florida, Texas, and the other states? I know a great deal was made of the new pied-à-terre tax only within the last month. There's been a lot of noise about pied-à-terre tax. Connecticut is talking about, thank God we have a rainy day fund. So I know that there's a great deal of tax anxiety. Is James right? Are we both talking about a momentary excitement of a migration maybe from New York to Connecticut, which makes Connecticut feel good, and some movement in New York because people are maybe taking advantage and trading up? But are we missing the bigger picture that the Northeast is not getting it done?
I mean, I'll take that, but Roberto, I'll let you start if you want to start. What you want me to go?
I mean, I think there's a little bit of truth to every single scenario there, and everybody's situations are unique. I think on a whole, people like leaving the Northeast, I mean, that will happen, but I mean, I'm not seeing that in like gross numbers or gross philosophy. I mean, there's a couple people with tremendous means who have the ability to pick up and go, and they're gone. And those are people that are typically closer to retirement, or they're hedge fund people that can pick up and go, and they're running from somewhere else.
But we're
I
both
think it's
losing our seniors. You're saying we're both losing our seniors, and we can get excited about all these $2 million deals that are happening with millennials. But the fact is, we're missing key pieces of the market.
Both expensive here. Taxes are incredible here, and they're only going up.
Look, I mean, I think that I don't feel like I'm missing anything in the market. I mean, John, I honestly feel that, I was fortunate. I came to New York literally with $800, $807 to be exact. I came to New York, and, I feel like that people are not coming here to pay higher taxes. They're coming here because they're drawn to the energy. I can't even imagine living anywhere else. And, people are like, oh my God, are you leaving the city? I was like, yeah, I've been in Montauk. I mean, thankfully I have a house in Montauk, a house in Bridgehampton, a house in Woodstock. I'm long on real estate. And I'm always going to be an investor in the market because that's what I know. And so I believe that I don't feel that I'm missing people going away. I am very purposefully helping people do estate planning with the idea as their advisor that, yes, there might be a pied-à-terre tax. They have a $50 million asset in Aspen, and they have a huge place in Connecticut, and they're moving to Florida because they don't want to pay taxes. And this is a billionaire. So that pattern is not the masses. You also have to remember New York City is a city of renters. Only 38% of New York can be bought, period, not negotiable. And everybody talks about all the construction that's going on. Yes, you had an amazing mayor that literally rezoned 40% of our land mass to create the opportunities and drawing the technology and drawing the diversity from finance to other industries. So I just think that we're going to lose. People are going to come and go, and I don't feel like we're missing something, John. Like you're getting something I don't get, and I don't look at it that way at all.
The question struck a nerve with Ashley O'Neill. She's sitting there in Palm Beach, Florida, and
Hi, Ashley.
Tell us, Ashley, are New Yorkers and Connecticut retirees moving to Palm Beach?
I'm happy to report yes. It struck me, you're from my old stomping grounds of starting in New York City and 30 years in New Canaan and Rowayton. So I know some of you, and it's really been fun to learn that Halstead is now with Brown Harris, because that's where I moved to and joined 2 years ago down here in Palm Beach. The other thing that struck me was you are all indoors, and I keep having to, my hair is blowing, so because it's 80 something down here. So if you all, listen, the market is just like it is out in Connecticut, which I'm so happy for you guys. I'm thrilled that it picked up. We're having the same surge down here as Louise was just talking about. The tax benefits are obviously way different than Connecticut, that's for sure. And the third quarter report just came out, and single family homes for the same quarter last year are up 245%.
Same with Aspen, by the way.
That goes hand in hand for sure. So if you have anybody that doesn't want to be in the cold anymore like me, I could take great care of them down here in Palm Beach. And it's good to see the Northerners again. I miss you guys.
I will quickly point out, I just changed my virtual background. And today's actually 75 degrees. It is a beautiful fall day. And I just put up one of the scene from like going jogging this morning with the color and the greenery. And it is one of the parts, I mean, as you know, I mean, it's Connecticut and New York and New Jersey. And you're close to the mountains, you're close to the sound, you get 4 seasons, you can ski. And as long as the cultural events are allowed to happen, there's just such a pull for New York and the suburban areas for concerts, live music, museums, just arts, just so many great things. Under COVID, and if COVID were to go on for 2 or 3 years, then that's a whole different animal, and that becomes really scary. But I do think that Connecticut does have an issue that, and New York and New Jersey, that if we don't get good governance, you can see where Florida not too long ago had horrible governance, and then they turned that around relatively quickly and is now very well governed. And the Northeast is definitely paying a price for that, and will continue to do so.
You know, John, the reality is that, you know, if the New York Times reported yesterday, big tech is coming in. Amazon, Google, Apple, Facebook, they're all expanding their footprints in the city. So maybe it's just a demographical change where it's a different type of person who's going to come live here. And the fact is, the flight of everybody out of here is actually creating better deals in Manhattan. People going to Brooklyn, it's a better deal in Manhattan. People going to Connecticut, it's a better deal in Manhattan. Those people are going to have places to live and they're going to have choices. And
for the first time, that is.
Yeah, for the first time. The deals they always wanted are now here, and it's now. It's amazing, you know.
And yeah, and we look at the growth from the Great Recession, and how sort of unsustainable with that building boom that we had. And you know, our cycles in real estate are not what they used to be, because they used to be almost 12 to 15 years. Then they shortened to 10. Now they're getting like 7. So we need it to be a long, steady, healthy recovery.
All right, I keep hearing now. So can we break down that word now? Because I got a lot of people asking me or telling me, you know what, I've decided to that there's so little inventory right now in Connecticut. I've decided to release in Manhattan, where I got a fabulous deal on the rental, and I'm going to just try again next year. So what advice do we have, Scott, Louise, Robert? What advice do we have for these people who are saying, you know, I think I might wait till the spring because I can, or I think I might wait till next year because I can. You know, what is our crystal ball on the impact of well, first of all, the impact of COVID, because you just had the mayor shut down big sections of the city, and last night Paris put the whole frickin' town under a curfew. So there's still anxiety around the pandemic. We're not out of the woods yet. We still have an election, and they say that after an election, you have indecision before an election, and then you have historically after an election, people feel confidence in a direction and start making decisions again. So long-winded question of saying, talk to me about timing. What are you advising your customers at all ends of the spectrum? You want to start, Scott? Because I know Louise has a lot to say.
I've got a lot to say, but I'll keep my mouth shut.
Well, I think Louise had started out with the big thing about just making sure you consult with your client. I mean, everyone has a different situation, and making sure that they do what's right for their situation. And it literally is a crystal ball. I mean, I'll tell you in 2 years whether or not you made the right decision or not. I think there's very good indicators that things will be strong in the, at least in the suburbs, for the foreseeable future.
What is the
anything can happen.
Future?
Yeah, I'd say the next 5 to 10 years. I mean, you've got the schools, you've got the access to New York, you've got a whole series of demographics that are lining up.
You're talking about
for the suburbs.
Connecticut?
I was like, Connecticut, New Jersey, and then Hamptons is a little bit different under the
secondary market. Yeah.
And the fact that you also have the benefit for the suburbs right now is that more and more you have the telecommuting, where you don't have to be in New York 5 days a week. I think more companies will go back to being, you've got to show up at least 2 or 3 days a week. So I don't think you can get too far from New York, but I don't think you have to do it every day. And that makes it a little bit easier to go ahead and move. It used to be an hour from New York. So if you're an hour and 20, if you're an hour and a half, even if you're 2 hours, it becomes possible if you're only doing it 4 or 5 times a month as opposed to every single day. So my guess is that things will be relatively strong for a while. If you were looking to buy, you knew what you were going to buy, and you felt confident in your financial situation, I'd be more tempted to buy. However, if you don't understand the areas and you're not confident you're going to be in the right place, renting, there's a lot that goes for it, and it'll just be tough for a while because the rental market's even hotter than the house market. But just my 2 cents.
Who else? Louise?
Roberto, go.
Well, from New York standpoint, I've been through so many downturns and downturns and downturns, and so many people trying to time things.
You're not that old.
I'm pretty old. I'm as old as you. We determined that.
Well, I'm older than all of y'all.
I doubt it. But the turn here, granted, this time is a little bit more. The issues are a little more deeply rooted this time, but the turn happens and it happens fast. And the next thing you know, people are chasing it back up. And I personally believe that by next spring, summer, vaccines, people's comfort level with how things are functioning in the city. I mean, you go outside right now, the cities, if people didn't have masks on, in many ways, you wouldn't know there was anything wrong. The city's just pumping and people have their systems in place of how they're functioning with it. But I believe come next spring, next summer, that people are going to start to want to get settled for the following school year, which is a year from now. So I believe that next spring and summer here could be extremely busy. And if you're going to try to time that, you're going to be in a situation, you could plausibly be in a situation where you're really competing for properties. So that downturn, you have already potentially have missed it. And right now is a time period where interest rates are unbelievably low. And the uncertainty of now is when you want to capture that. That's when you want to capture, the people that have made the best deals ever. My client who made the best deal ever was in March, April of 2009. I think the stock market had hit something like 6,800. It literally had dipped. He bought right then. He's made more out of equity on his property than any client I have. And that was when people thought the world was ending. It's my 2 cents.
Well, I don't necessarily agree. I don't agree with exactly. I mean, I agree that people are trying to time the market. But again, my advice is, if you're really trying to upgrade for the next decade, my opinion is sell today, because I believe people's apartments are worth more today. And I think they will be possibly worth less for a domino effect. One thing you did not address at all, Roberto, is the cause and effect. Unlike a stock market that peaks and goes and does what it does through real-time news, real estate, you can't see what's happening today for about 16 months where a pattern, a trend is started. And office buildings, retail, restaurant, how long are those and what's the cause and effect of that? Because I think that is a reality nobody's talking about, because I can, purchase my home today and be fine if it's a 10-year play and it drops 50,000, 200,000, and I'm still, my real value is in liquidating today and then making sure you only purchase when it feels right and data can confirm that. So those are the things that I feel that.
But so how much more room are you seeing on a downside? We have come from 5 years of the air slightly coming out of a balloon. We started from the decline. This COVID came right at a time when the market was finally starting to move.
Yep.
Finally starting to move. Everybody was anticipating an extremely successful year. And we've fallen, and there's not that much more room. There is definitely some room for sure. But again, it's a matter of the timing of the marketplace. It will become competitive, and people who are trying to buy are going to find themselves in bidding situations.
Yes, and my point is, don't forget that if you're holding risk or you're holding an asset, you get to live in it's not like a portfolio, you're living in your home today. But if you're trying to make, and by the way, all 8 of those deals are people I've sold them their homes and they're upgrading very purposefully. But it's the science and the finessing.
But they're buying.
Yes, because they see the value of the next decade. They are expanding their footprint.
We agree.
We agree?
We agree.
Yeah, but I also feel that they should be selling today. Some people feel they should wait and sell later. And I'm not
saying that. I didn't say that. I was just talking about buying.
Okay.
I was talking about buying.
Are you both painting the whole New York market with one brush? You feel the same way about Brooklyn as you do Manhattan and the
Brooklyn,
$40 million penthouse and the $1 million pied-à-terre? Really?
Everything's a micro market, and it all depends upon people's individual situations.
But you're both bullish at the high end and low end of the market.
I don't know if I would say I'm bullish. I feel it's an
First thing you
opportunistic.
sell.
No, I'm saying that I believe it's an opportunistic moment and will continue to be. I mean, if you look at the construction and the number of units and the developments that's happening there and the growth of tens of thousands of units, and again, I keep talking, we went from a 35 to a 38, maybe we're at 39% of New York. And when I talk about New York, I talk about all the boroughs. The construction that's happened and the growth that's happened in Brooklyn since probably 2008 or 9. When we look at that stuff, those numbers, you know, it's cheaper to live in financial district than it is to live in most parts of Brooklyn. And so it's the far parts of Brooklyn, the further away you are, I believe that those markets are going to have issues absorbing all the product. So I think that for people who are looking at development projects, look at all those deals where they're 70% done and they're waiting for their profit to get out. Those are where the deals can be made.
They're all coming back to Manhattan.
I'm going to tell you, in the most recent market report, when I looked at the 16 towns in Fairfield County, and I mapped them as to which ones are doing the best increase in total dollar volume, what I found was it wasn't the wealthy versus the less expensive markets. The difference was in the density. And the more dense markets were growing more slowly than the less dense markets. Specifically, Westport and New Canaan were doing double-digit fantastic. Westport was the number one out of the 16 markets with 77% year-over-year increase in total dollar volume. The bottom most market was Stamford, only showing about a month ago 2% growth. So you had probably 8 towns showing 15% growth or less, and you had 8 towns showing 25 to 75% growth of their real estate markets in the first 9 months of this year. Given that backdrop,
is that relative to value? For example, Tribeca being very expensive and the Lower East Side not being as expensive. Is it follow that grid?
That's the distinction I want to draw. So Greenwich, alongside of Norwalk and Stamford, is what I consider to have a greater density. And the Greenwich market was not showing, for whatever reason, those big towns were showing 10%, 8% year over year growth. Now, I mean, Old Greenwich is the most expensive market in the county with an average price of about $2.3 million for a house. Right. And yet, you know, so I was finding that it was where we saw the greatest growth was in the smaller towns, Weston, Westport. And if you try and figure out why, one of the reasons was that the commute, the Metro North commute, became a lot less important than it was a year or 2 or 10 years ago. Mm. People were looking for different mix of qualities. And so suddenly North Stamford was hot and Weston was hot and Easton and Reading and places that I could drive to within an hour and a half were suddenly hot. North New Canaan was suddenly hot. I think. So what's the equivalent trend in New York?
I would say that I was about to just sort of say that I would say that's exactly what happened in Brooklyn. So you have an anchor like Tesla taking a commercial spot in Red Hook, or you have a artist center that then gives birth to 2 cafes and a little restaurant and a little bookstore and a little grocer. And then next thing you know, there is, 8 blocks away, a 10-story development project. And that's your anchor. And that becomes where, when you have, I believe that is sort of the way that you see Brooklyn creeping out, and in the last 3 years, 4 years, Sunnyside, Queens, and different parts of Queens start to have absorption and opportunity, where if you cross from, keep moving further away, you see that, the millennial generation is now looking for, places where they can work from home. Before COVID, they were working 30% from home. And so I just think that is the same analogy that you're just giving about the little towns that aren't the anchor breadwinners. That makes sense to me, that those are leading in growth faster than would have been projected.
Roberto?
I mean, I don't disagree with that. I think I think she's right.
And I think you can also go to look at projects on the Upper West Side that are in prime Harlem, which I would now actually call Columbia. The Vanderwater project, which was pulling, 23 or whatever crazy, there were crazy price per square foot numbers, but that was trying to be an anchor in a location with a lot of amenities. And thank God we have bold developers that want to create a lifestyle building in an unventured territory. That's what I did with 50 Madison Avenue in the East Village with the Theater for the New City, where you put these little anchors in and then the market comes to it. That's what those blurred boundaries of New York City have been, for the 30 years I've been doing it, have been pushed deal by deal. And it's kind of exciting to actually witness it and experience it. And this will give birth to those other boundaries being passed by. You'll have somebody like Scott, who would have never been doing, been asked to do a deal in a certain neighborhood, if you will, because maybe he would have been considered the high end. But that person, I have a lot of clients that have rolled the dice in a neighborhood and had the best architect and the best contractor and invested in a low cost basis and broke the records when they sold it. But they only did it for themselves. They didn't try to calculate that purchase.
I'm going to New York and I want a deal. I see somebody, the last comment in the chat was, I totally agree with Louise. There's a big level of denial at the moment in the New York City economy. So if there's a lot of denial, where can I go to find a deal in New York City? Where do you think they've reckoned with the change, and they're moving houses, they're moving apartments, they're moving brownstones? Where can I go for a deal?
I mean, I think the townhouse market is unbelievably opportunistic, but still not acknowledging the reality of, there are people in the industry that are like, oh, the townhouse market's going to go through the roof because there's no elevator, there's no people, there's outdoor. And yes, there might be some of that absorption from that, but I still think there's still fallout happening in townhouses from the accelerated growth from 2009 through 15, where these numbers were crazy numbers. And, I know I sold a house in 17, maybe in 16, that in 15, I thought it was worth $23 million. And ultimately, I said it's not worth 23 million as we started into 16, but they had their mind set on what they wanted. We sold it for 14.75 million, and it was 10,000 square feet, and it was off Madison in the East 80s. So I feel like that is still, you can find those pockets, and it all depends on what the story is behind the individual often.
Scott, you and I were talking about demographics this past weekend. Talk to me about millennials. Talk to me about where is the money? I believe that the millennial generation is a lot wealthier, are coming into wealth. And are they the ones spending with you? Or are you finding people at the end of their career, the retirees, are spending and picking up these second homes? Where's the money coming from?
We're actually, I mean, luckily we're across the board. I mean, we're doing a couple for someone that's in their late 70s. We're doing stuff for people in their 30s. And it's, I think the millennials, I mean, they're the biggest demographic group to come through. They have again, the kids are getting to be school age, which of course drives a whole lot of things. I think the millennials, just timing wise, they were behind our generations where, just a little bit later getting out of school, a little bit later getting married. You have the financial crisis in the middle of it. There's this school debt is something which is, again, the college debt is a problem for a lot of millennials trying to go ahead and build up that nest egg to buy stuff. But we still find people from across the board, and financial services still leads the area. But now you're getting more tech people, more marketing people, more industrialist folks, and it's a pretty broad spectrum. So and I hope that will continue. It is tricky in that of course, as you move from a rental market to a house, that's a big change, and you learn a whole lot as a homeowner. And so a lot of the people that have now moved out from the city to the country, they're in their first houses. We'll see how they do into their first house. If they go to a second house or a third house, and some of them succeed more than others and figure out what their real likes and dislikes are, hopefully our business on the custom side will continue to grow over time. I think I answered that question, but.
I think I lost the screen. I can't see what you see.
You're frozen, John.
Am I frozen?
Yeah.
Am I okay now?
You're kind of smiling.
Oh,
You're looking a little stiff.
I'm still here.
Oh, there you are.
The election. Is the election going to affect the New York or Connecticut market at all? I haven't heard anybody talking about the election. It's almost a complete non-event.
Well, unfortunately, it's not a mayoral election, but just saying. I agree. I mean, listen, I looked up the 2016, and housing prices rose before the election, and after the election, they rose more. Is that what's happening now?
The election is notoriously puts a tremendous amount of uncertainty into the marketplace. And in the fall of a presidential election year, things definitely start to slow.
I don't feel so slow.
So how do you explain my circumstance?
But I think that the uncertainty that we've had, has started in March. And now we've gotten so accustomed to that level of uncertainty, and things are actually, it almost feels like spring because we're starting to get back to normal. Things are happening, and the election is almost secondary to that. Taxes are going to go up. Everybody knows all these different things are going to happen. It's just a matter of, is it going to be smooth or is it not going to be smooth? I think it's built in. I think it's already built in.
Yeah, who wants to flip a coin on who's winning the election?
So it doesn't really matter. I mean, these two candidates couldn't be more different and representing polar, difference, and the implications, the tax implications, the growth implications. I mean, the implications are enormous between one approach and the other approach, and nobody's talking about that as a factor weighing into their decision, really.
Roberto, I think, had a good observation that this has been the biggest period of uncertainty in virtually all of our lives. So I think that there has been a tampering inside of the election. But once the election's done, everyone looks up and says, well, am I going to put my life on hold for 4 years? And the reality is your kids are getting older. The kitchen still needs to be redone. Another baby's coming along. You're retiring. You're moving. And you're not going to wait 4 years. I mean, as you get close to the election, things could get even more busy very soon after the election, and they would be more busy now, except for there are some people on the sideline. But I do think COVID has been a much bigger factor than the election this year, even though this is one of the more contentious.
Yeah, and I think that COVID and it's been politicized, unfortunately, pretty tremendously, where I think people just can't even listen to it anymore. That they have to kind of do this, cut the noise out. That's actually my advice. I mean,
I'm going to go out on a limb and I'm going to make a statement. You tell me if it's right or wrong. But
it's wrong, John.
That New Yorkers look at Biden and they say, he's going to be nice to New York. And I think the New Yorkers look at Trump and they say, he's already done the worst to us he could do. He already gave us SALT and taxes. So there's nothing else that a Trump administration is going to do to New York. And so I think that New York feels like they've been punished enough for the last couple of years, right? And it's not going to get any worse. It can only get better. Is that fair? Is that a fair
I
assumption?
mean,
It can still get worse.
I think
It worse.
I think Chuck
still get
Schumer
worse.
is a fan of New York. I think that he would advocate if he's got the minority, but you know, who knows? I mean, anything's better than what we got. So,
And John, as a native New Yorker, are you saying that you actually think New Yorkers don't think things can get worse? That's a characteristic. But I do think that everyone, that again, people overall become optimistic in spite of what they do say, and people do have to get on with their lives. I mean, and once it's over, and you got 4 more years, and you're not going to wait 4 years to do what you have to in your life.
So we have a few more minutes in front of us. We got 95 people, mostly agents on this call. How do I get in front of those New Yorkers? How do I generate business? How do I get in front of these people who are thinking about making a move? How does Louise do it for people who are trying to make a crosstown move? How does Scott get in front of people who are thinking about building a big house out in the country? How are we generating, I guess, the relationships we need for our businesses? Anybody have a tip? I believe that New Yorkers like Louise move through a building. They have a reputation in that building. People in the building tell other people in the building, and therefore it's very easy to establish a reputation building by building. Is that fair?
I think deal by deal, you know, for me, it used to be like, you know, I would get a referral from Goldman Sachs, you know, fixed income. It would be like, oh, I just did the whole desk. And then it would be like, oh, Whitehall, real estate, whole desk. And so I think that it's one deal at a time. I also will say for agents, you know, that dialing for dollars and generosity of knowledge is massive. In other words, I try always to be of service to another agent if they ask me for financials, for anything, because what goes around comes around. I have brought over probably 75 to 80 brokers into the business, just interviewing people going, hey, would you have coffee with me? And I have to tell you, me taking that time to do that, I can't tell you how many times they've been eventually years later in the business, and I'm on the other side of a negotiation, and I get those deals because you know what? They remember. So be generous to your industry colleagues. Buyers and sellers are here today and gone tomorrow, but you need Scott forever. You need John forever. You need me forever, and I need you. And that would be my best advice.
Scott, Roberto?
Roberto, go ahead.
I mean, I believe it is totally deal by deal. And it's a matter of treating everybody with respect and doing what's right for the people who you're working with. I mean, it always come back to you. I've had so many deals that just didn't work out, and we didn't make, you know, we negotiated in a certain way, but I knew that those were the limitations that these certain buyers might have had, or a seller might have had. And you just did the right thing. The deal didn't happen. But then down the road, you know, when you least expect it, that phone rings and you're like, you know, I remember you, or I got your name from so-and-so. You know, I have one client, one of my biggest clients, it was a really peculiar situation, but he bought an $11+ million apartment, and it just didn't happen with me. And we were working together, but he trusted me and he loved me. And I eventually did sell his apartment when it came around. But one of his colleagues called me up and said, listen, so-and-so told me to call you, and he told me I have to buy a really expensive apartment from you. And he bought a $16 million apartment from me. So, you know, it just deal by deal, do the right thing.
Yeah.
I think the key is to be part of a 3rd-generation family business with a 65-year history of doing things right.
Business just falls in your lap, right?
But even still, what is, I mean, playing along with Louise and Roberto here, I mean, even still, everything is just one deal. It's one deal at a time. You're one deal away from screwing up your reputation. You want to make sure that you do the right by your clients. You know, don't do bad deals that don't help your client, because that'll come back to bite you. Whereas again, if you walk away from something, you can still end up doing better by walking away sometimes than you can by doing that deal. So don't force it. Don't lie to the client. Don't be overly rosy. Tell the truth, and, you know, work your butt off for them to get them the best deal.
Some contractor that said something to me early in the business, said, you know, what I learned from my dad was that the last 10% sometimes of the deal, of the whole project, is what they remember. So how you exit. And I was thinking, that's interesting. So they all love me when they start with me. I want them to love me when they leave me, you know? And that is why you can't go like, I'm too busy. We've done that deal. We're in contract. I can't meet you then. I'm too busy. I think it's so important for people to feel, you know, important, heard, and that it doesn't matter, you know, we're going to end in the way I started, which is with all that integrity and dedication.
I like that. All right. So it's 5 o'clock. This was an experiment. I think it worked from where I'm sitting. It worked. I think we got a lot covered this week. I think this is an important conversation to have. I'm so glad 100 people joined us for it. I think we should continue to commit to doing this regularly on Thursdays. Doesn't mean you have to join me every Thursday, you know, but I would like to think that the people who joined us today will come back the next week and the next week and perhaps participate in the conversation. I think it's going to be really important that we as agents, as you say, Louise, are communicating with each other and talking about the market and talking to customers and being, as you said, generous when it comes to referring out of market and sharing ideas out of market. So I think this was really successful. I thank you for a really great conversation. I hope you'll come back and we'll organize another one in a week, maybe 2, and see how it goes.
Great.
Perfection.
Thanks, John.
Thanks for organizing, John.
John, really appreciate it. Cheers.
Great, everyone.
Out about
See you
that.
guys.
See you in the hood.
Yeah, exactly.
Bye-bye.
Take care, guys. Bye-bye.